This time on the Plutopia podcast, we get a math lesson, so sharpen your pencils and pay attention. Colin Wright received his doctorate in pure mathematics from Cambridge University. He has a passion for math and is happy to spend his time giving talks on how maths are present everywhere.
Math is not about numbers, it's not about formulas, it's about patterns, and knowing that patterns work forever rather than just being spurious or ephemeral. So it's being able to abstract from whatever you're doing, throwing away irrelevant detail and working with the abstract setting. And it's all about patterns and structures and relationships. And at its heart, that's what math is really about. And it just turns up absolutely everywhere. I meet a lot of kids who have no apparent predisposition towards mathematics, who then, education's not about filling the bucket, it's about lighting the fire. You give them something that engages them and gets them starting to think about a thing, and they can come to life, and suddenly they might be slow, they might not have the knowledge that other people have got, they might not have the practice and the practiced skills that some of the others have, but sometimes they just blossom, and there's no apparent reason why they should have been pre-wired for that, and yet they can do it.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the Plutopia News Network Podcast. Your hosts today, Jon Lebkowsky, along with Sweeney and Wendy Grossman. And we like to show up every week to interview truly interesting people. And this week, we're going to be interviewing the very interesting Colin Wright. Colin is a mathematician and a juggler who gives talks on how maths turn up in unexpected and expected places and can be cool, weird, surprising, and useful. He's also known for his work in developing, I hope I get this right, Siteswap notation, a numerical system for describing juggling patterns. So, I guess the first question is, you started out doing like pure math, computing, and then you got into commercial radar systems, which to me feels kind of like a leap. How did that happen? And what did you get from that experience?
So I did my PhD, didn't quite finish in time, and took a post doing research in maths to allow me to actually finish doing my PhD. And then took a contract at Liverpool University doing research in computing. And during that time, I got my UK equivalent of a green card. So I got permission to stay in the UK and work so I could do some consultancy. And believe it or not, it's the way these things always work. My girlfriend of the time had a summer job, and there were things about that she didn't understand. So on the weekends, we'd sort of go through this thing. And I didn't know it either, but Socratic method is wonderful. So we would work on that together. And after a while, her boss for her summer job ended up saying to her, "Who's helping you with this? And can I talk to them?" So I went in and had a chat with this guy, and he ended up giving me a little bit of extra work to do. So I did some consultancy for him. And when my contract at the university finished, Bill said to me, "So what do you intend to do now?" And I talked about some of my options, and he said, "Forget all that, come and work for me." And I said, "Well, what would I do?" And he said, "I don't know, we'll make up something." Because I just thought differently from everybody that he had in the place. So for some problems, you don't need a hammer, you need a screwdriver. And for some problems, you need a wrench. It just different ways of thinking. And within 6 weeks, I was actually sent to Sweden to fix a piece of equipment that wasn't working, hadn't been working for 18 months, and they were about to invoke penalty clauses on the contract. And within 4 days, I'd actually fixed it. Just a different approach to the way it works. And after that, I had enough brownie points to kind of do pretty much anything I wanted within the company. So I investigated how to send radar images over basically a piece of wet string over very, very low capacity communications links. I investigated how to track targets, difficult targets. So small plastic boats in a lot of sea clutter is a classic problem, because the radar return looks the radar return from the boat looks just like the radar return from the sea clutter. So basically, I ended up using ideas of how to analyze problems the way that I did with my pure maths PhD, and brought that approach to the problems, allied with the guys from engineering. And this was the brilliant thing. We worked well together. They respected that I could do things they couldn't, and I respect that they just made amazing stuff. And working together, we ended up producing some really cool stuff. So the company has done well. It's gone through some difficult times. I'm still associated with them, but largely now I've taken a step back from that company and spending my time going out and doing the sideline that started in the mid 80s, which is to go out and do talks about math turning up in strange places, like in juggling.
Do you think that in most contexts you're kind of a different kind of thinker, or do you ever find yourself in a context where everybody else kind of thinks the way you think?
It's rare that everybody thinks the way I think, because I tend to put myself in situations where I'm with a variety of people. So when I go out for dinner with the people that I did a PhD at the same time as, or other PhD students in math, usually they're cleverer than I am. They're faster thinkers than I am. They're more knowledgeable than I am. But we tend to think the same way. It's just I'm a bit slower and so forth. But I try to seek out people who have knowledge, experience, abilities that I don't have, so that we hopefully can learn from each other. It's that enrichment side of things. So I don't often find myself in a group where everybody thinks the same way, but I do regularly find myself in groups where everybody has a wide range of interests with bizarre amounts of overlap, such as the event that I run each November, the Maths Jam annual gathering. It's just full of people who are happy to have maths around and happy to have people talking about maths, but at the same time, most of the conversations are about other things, games, puzzles, toys. Distribution of particle size in eye makeup was one of the conversations that happened a while. Sharpening
That's math.
ice skates. Yeah, well, I mean, there's math in everything. I mean, this is the whole thing. This is what we found with the juggling. With ballroom dancing, I do ballroom dancing. I came up with a notation to help me remember the steps. I've got a really bad memory, so I developed systems to help me remember stuff and write down stuff. And there's maths absolutely everywhere, because math is not about numbers. It's not about formulas. It's about patterns, and knowing that patterns work forever rather than just being spurious or ephemeral. So it's being able to abstract from whatever you're doing, throwing away irrelevant detail and working with the abstract setting. And it's all about patterns and structures and relationships. And at its heart, that's what math is really about. And it just turns up absolutely everywhere.
Well, it's like I always tell people that Scrabble is really a mental arithmetic game, not a word game.
Yeah. I mean, you're constantly looking for the opportunity to score. I mean, it's not making the words. That's not the point. The point is to score. I mean, when you're playing any kind of game like that, and it's that interaction between what's going on. And unless you've got that mental arithmetic aspect and spot the possibilities, then somebody who does have that ability or has that point of view is going to beat you.
Yeah, one of my friends gets, I think she thinks of it as a word game, and she gets so enamored, she gets enamored of the word in her rack, and she'll sacrifice points in order to put it down. And if you want to win, you can't do that.
Well, when Rachel and my wife and I play backgammon, that's the only game that we play really, and we don't care who wins. We want an interesting game. We want an exciting game. So sometimes we'll make moves that are clearly the wrong move. If your objective were to win, it's the wrong move, but it can make the game more interesting and more dynamic. So I have some sympathy for your friend's point of view of being captured by seeing the word on the board rather than going for the points and going for the win. I can understand that.
That makes me think about some of these block games where you try to clear the blocks, and that you got to keep focused on the goal of clearing the blocks. And what can really screw you up is when you see a pattern there that you really want to find something to fit that pattern versus just keep clearing blocks. So, you just have to have the right strategy.
Yeah. And again, this is the balance between the enjoyment that you're getting from the activity versus the potential objective of trying to win. If winning is how you're going to enjoy this game, then great, do that. But sometimes winning is not the point. And different people have different attitudes to this. For some people, winning is the only thing that matters. I know one guy who, when he plays Mornington Crescent, I don't know if you guys know the game Mornington Crescent.
They won't know Mornington Crescent.
No. Okay. So the idea of Mornington Crescent is actually just to enjoy the play of the game. And eventually you end up at this London Underground station called Mornington Crescent. And it's all made up. It's all invented. It's all just a reason for people to have some wordplay and so forth. Whenever I tried to play with a particular friend of mine and said, okay, so it's my first station is Seven Sisters. And he says, okay, Mornington Crescent. Because as far as he was concerned, to win, you just get to Mornington Crescent. There's no play apart from that, and it's totally pointless.
Is your friend possibly an AI?
No.
That's how AIs behaved. Janelle Shane wrote this wonderful book called "You Look Like a Thing and I Love You," and one of the things that she brings out in it is how you'd give an AI an objective, and it will do all sorts of unhuman things in order to achieve the objective, and none of them being what you had in mind when you started programming.
Yeah. I mean, there was the guy, Doug Leonard, used to enter a competition to build fleets of ships to do stuff. And he got computers to help him analyze what the best things were. And he just trashed the opponents one year. And then the next year they changed the rules and he trashed the opponents again. And then the next year they came to him and said, you can enter if you want, but if you choose to enter, we will not run the competition. Because he found these inhuman ways of thinking by working with the computer. He found these ways of thinking. And the same things happened with AlphaGo. I mean, some of the moves that the very first Go playing machine that was any good could do. Yeah, it came out with moves that didn't have a story behind them. It didn't have an explanation from, I'm trying to accomplish this or trying to accomplish that. And some of the moves that it came up with, the experts would go, it's an inhuman move. It's not the kind of move that a human player would come up with. And it's probably a mistake. And much, much further down the line, they realized it wasn't a mistake. And it was playing better than humans, but it was playing a bit like an alien in places. And that was quite a big deal.
There's a game where mathematicians are not really welcome, and that's blackjack, card counting and blackjack. And if they know you're a mathematician, you will immediately have a lot of friends in the casino watching you.
Yeah. I used to go to a local casino when I was a student, impoverished student. I used to go to a local casino and I used to play blackjack for the evening. I used to play for 2.5 hours and I could card count and I could play well enough not to lose money. And the thing was, it gave me a free meal because, that they will bring food to you at the table to sort of keep you there. I did end up slightly in the black, slightly positive over the course of time that I was doing this, but that's by pure chance. If you want to win at card counting in blackjack, the cards come in your favor about one time in 10. So what you have to do is play small bet, small bet, small bet, small bet, and then when the cards are in your favor, then you play huge bets 20 times what you've been usually playing. And that's the thing that the casinos look for, is when you're playing piddling amounts and then suddenly put on a huge amount. And in Vegas, it's not illegal to do this, but what they'll do is they immediately then shuffle the shoe. So that means that your advantage is destroyed. So they have ways of getting around that. But mathematicians are usually very bad at card counting. Most mathematicians are very, very bad at rapid mental arithmetic because they're into structure and pattern and form. They're not necessarily into lightning arithmetic. And it's hard work. It takes a lot of practice to be able to count the cards.
I've never understood how it's done, really.
Well, the basic idea is that if there are large cards in the deck, you don't want to be drawing cards. And if there's a predominance of small cards in the deck, then you do want to be drawing cards. So if you watch the large cards go by and the small cards go by, and you find that there's been an imbalance between those, then you can say in the remainder of the deck, there's more small cards than the average would suggest. Therefore, you should bet larger amounts and draw more cards because you are less likely to bust. Whereas the dealer doesn't have a choice as to whether they draw or don't draw. So all you do is you count. If you want a one register count, you can go much more complicated than this, but you count +1 every time you see a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. You don't change your count if you see a 7, 8, or 9, and you count -1 if you see a 10, Jack, Queen, King, or Ace. And then when that count is +2 or more, the deck is in your favor on average for what's going on. That's the one register count. There are more complicated ones.
I had no idea it was so simple. I always thought you actually counted each card, And I mean, in Scrabble, you certainly, there's certainly some letters that you track closely and others that you don't bother with.
No, absolutely.
The card shoe that they use is supposed to be based on a random number generator. And I understand that there is no such real random number generator unless there's been one invented that I hadn't heard about.
Well, actually, at Cloudflare, for example, which is a computer networking place, they have to generate random numbers for their security, and they actually have a wall full of lava lamps, and they have cameras watching the lava lamps. And then they say at a given moment, they'll take a picture of this and look at a pixel and say, is this in a blob or not in a blob? And that's genuinely, as far as we know, that's genuinely random. You give it enough time, and it's a chaotic system. So you've got enough time. So it's using the physical noise from this wall of lava lamps. But if you try and do it just by using sums, no, there are methods of generating numbers which are indistinguishable from random by all known tests, but they're not actually random, whatever that means. So what a lot of computers will do is they'll actually sample white noise from the microphone. And there are ways of taking a biased sample and turning it into an unbiased sample. So, for example, if you have a coin and every flip has the same possibility of heads, but you don't know that it's exactly a half, then what you can do is flip the coin twice. If they're both heads, ignore it and start again. If they're both tails, ignore it and start again. But if one is a head and one is a tail, you take the first of those two. And the probability of that being a head is exactly a half. So it's a way of creating an unbiased stream of heads and tails from what is probably a biased coin. So there are tricks to do that. They're comparatively inefficient. People have started to say, how efficient can we make this process, and so on. So there are ways of sampling white noise or thermal noise from your laptop, from your computer, or from a mainframe. And that's a physical source of random information that you can then turn into an unbiased stream of ones and zeros, which is what you want for all sorts of cryptography and encoding and everything else.
You're making me think about the I Ching, where you get advice from ancient Chinese sages based on the role of, or how the koans fall.
Yeah.
Koans or yarrow stalks. I mean, that's a mathematics system.
Or sticks that are dropped on a plane and how many of them cross over each other and so forth. And this is the thing. I mean, we do want random numbers for some of the processes that we use. And anyone who uses computer arithmetic to generate random numbers is in a state of sin. I'm trying to remember who said that. It might have been Don Knuth said that. And yeah, you can't use predictable arithmetic to create unpredictability. So what you have to do is somehow pull in the real world. And they used to say to somebody, just randomly mash on your keyboard for a while and keep going and keep going and keep going. And then after a while, they say, that's enough. We've got enough entropy. We've got enough randomness in the system now to generate a random number that we want.
Are those lava lamps that all those hippies at Cloudflare put up? Are those are truly random? I mean, it seems like there could be some predictability there.
There's overall predictability. You could say on average we tend to have a lump coming up every now and again, but what they do is they've got a lot of them, and they sample the first one, and then they sample the second one, and then they sample the third one. It's a long time before they come back to the first one, and a small change in the initial condition can lead to wildly different results. This is what chaos is. This is what these sorts of the butterfly effect and chaotic weather systems and so forth. It's basically you can start something in what looks like it's exactly the same position, but actually over time it then ends up diverging wildly. And you can picture this if you take the one that we usually use is if you take bread that you're making, if you take dough that you're making bread with, and you put two raisins or something in it, and then you stretch it out and fold it over, and stretch it out and fold it over, and stretch it out and fold it over. And every time you stretch it out, those raisins get a little bit further apart. But they're still fairly close together in some broad sense. But there comes a point where they're in different halves, and when you fold it over, the distance between them suddenly changes radically. And so when you get things like a double pendulum or a weather system, things can look very similar for quite a long time and then suddenly diverge to be completely different. And that's what happens with the lava lamps. You know, they broadly are doing the same kind of thing, but exactly whether there's a blob here at this instant or not is unpredictable over a course of 5 minutes or so.
That makes me think about a conversation I was in earlier today, actually, where somebody was talking about how we were talking about AI and LLMs, large language models, and they say, well, all an LLM really does is predict the next. They're designed to predict what is the likely next word in a string, and it's like it's simply that, and that's all it is. But I was thinking, well, no, it's not. I mean, yeah, that's a simple thing, and you can say they simply do that. But from the simplicity of making that prediction, if you get pretty sophisticated with those predictions, then you have like emergent capabilities that are far more complex, right?
Yeah.
And
So
that's why I think people underestimate LLMs if they say that they simply predict the next word in the sequence.
it's certainly true that the place to start is with this thing that we call a Markov chain, which is that you're in some state, you predict what's likely to come next, and then you go that one, and then you pick what's likely to come next. And if you've got a chain of 5 words, and you use a statistical model to say what could follow those 5 words, what are all the options, what's the most likely, you end up with something that locally in small sections looks plausible, but globally is just utter nonsense and immediately recognizable as utter nonsense. So the LLMs are doing a lot more than that, but basically they're also training on vast amounts more data. So you're not predicting the next thing on just the 5 words, but also words that are similar to each other in those contexts, and much more than just 5 words, but also every 10th word going back for some number. But it's still a statistical model to predict what feels like it could come next, but it's got a longer range that it works over. So using that as a starting point for understanding what they do is a reasonable thing, but saying that that's all they do is criminally underestimating how powerful they are. The thing that you can do is have a conversation with them about something you actually know, and get them to answer a question about a thing that you actually know. And very quickly you realize they don't know anything. They are producing answers that have the shape of knowing something. Now, when it's in an area that you don't know, when it's on a topic that you don't know and you're asking for an explanation, it looks completely plausible. This is like the Edward Knoll principle, also known, I think it was Michael Crichton who called it the Gell-Mann amnesia principle. You're reading a newspaper and you look at an article and you think, well, this is very insightful. This is very helpful. Turn the page, look at another article. This is very insightful, very helpful. Turn the page, there's an article about something you know, and you go, well, this is complete nonsense. Yeah, this is utter rubbish. Then you turn the page to an article on something that you don't know, and you go, "Oh, this is very insightful." You immediately forget that it was utter nonsense when you had a way of assessing whether or not it was right.
I was actually going to say that I hear what you were saying about LLMs. I hear that a lot about journalists. That as soon as you've read a journalist on something you know about, you don't trust anything else they've ever written. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work that way with LLMs.
Well, people aren't yet terribly critical about LLMs. People have a suspicion about journalists. People have a distrust about the print media, especially these days. People have a distrust about the media in general, and it's a problem because you can't present 10 years of research in its entirety in a 500-word article. So you have to have some simplifications, and then people who do know about this go, "Well, you've left out that, and you've left out that." No, it's much more nuanced than this. But you're not, they're not your audience for that sort of thing. And the problem with LLMs is that quite often they are just genuinely wrong and misleadingly confident. There are places where they are absolutely brilliant and absolutely perfect for what you want. Summarizing a vast amount of stuff that's already out there, they're very good at that. But synthesizing new things, they just don't seem to be able to do that yet. But it's also changing. The landscape is changing incredibly quickly because there's a lot of money behind this, and people want their money back. And so they're putting in the work to try and improve what's going on. And huge advances are being made. They've got basically LLMs coupled with reasoning machines that are trying to solve the International Math Olympiad questions. And they're doing incredibly well. So perhaps this is an indictment of the kinds of questions that are asked in those exams. Or perhaps it's genuinely saying these things can solve those sorts of problems.
Yeah, I think we were into a question of value. I mean, I was in a conversational environment, and at some point had posted something that and I got from an AI. And from my perspective, I did a query about something that I was kind of trying to work through, and I got a response that actually changed my mind about something. Uh, and it wasn't something that I didn't know enough about to get that there was some validity to the response. But I said, well, look, so I'm posting this thing here, and I said, this actually changed my mind about, the thing we were talking about. And there were people who said, well, that's just AI slop. Why are you posting it here? You shouldn't post that here because it doesn't have any value. Because, in other words, it's just a bunch of words thrown together by an AI, and it doesn't really have any sense to it. And it says, well, if it didn't have any sense to it, how did it change my thinking?
Yeah, it has value. I don't say anything. I don't deny that at all. It absolutely has value, but it also has the limitations are much greater than people think. I mean, the very, very first conversational computer program was Eliza by Weizenbaum, and he was horrified. The anecdote that goes, he was horrified when his secretary insisted on being left alone so that she could talk with it in confidence. And it's extremely easy to suck people into believing that something is behaving rationally and so on. I mean, I know that my printer dislikes me. I mean, I just know that. And there are other bits of machinery around the house that I know like me because they all just always work for me. And we anthropomorphize so easily.
Is your printer mean to you, Colin?
Oh, it is. It is. Every time I want to print something, if I'm in a hurry, it senses that and it says, "Okay, today I'm not working for you."
One of my friends said every car came with a black box that kept track of that no manufacturer would admit to, that kept track of your bank balance. And whenever you got a little bit ahead, it would break something in the car.
Yeah. And make sure that I've got money. Oh, good. I'll siphon that from you. Thank you very much. No, absolutely. But I mean, I have I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but I think that people are predisposed to assume that another entity is intelligent and has feelings because you have to assume that about other people. I mean, why? Yeah, I meet a new person. Why should I believe that they have feelings? Why should I believe that they're intelligent? I am predisposed to believe that. And this is perhaps a imperative that's programmed into us to believe that these other entities are intelligent and have feelings. Because if we didn't do that, then we'd end up being utter sociopaths, all of us.
I think it's socialized into us. I don't think it's necessarily. I mean, if it'd be an interesting thing to look at some of the kids that have lived in the wild and didn't have parents, But I think it's socialized into us, and that's why some people are good at it and some people are bad at it, and some people, really don't understand other people as emotional entities.
I think with all these things, you can't separate nature from nurture. There's the interaction between them, and some people will be more inclined to do this, and some people require more socialization. I think it was Stephen Wright who said, I'm really bad at spelling. I don't know if it's nature or nurture." And so sorry. So people say to me, are people naturally good at maths? Coming back to the maths question. And there are some people who seem to be good at maths from a very early age, but you can say, well, did their parents constantly count with them? Did they measure things out? Did they have toys like this? Yeah, perhaps some people are built to have a predisposition towards this, perhaps not. I don't know. I can't tell. And people refuse to allow me to experiment on children the way I want to determine whether or not this works. Perhaps rightly. No, I have no desire to experiment on students like this, but children like this, but you can't do that. So I prefer to say there is an aspect of socialization. But equally, perhaps there's an element of pre-programming that would be swamped. Now, there was a famous soccer coach in the UK who said, hard work will beat lazy talent every day.
They say that in tennis. They say that in tennis too, that it's not enough to they say that in tennis too, that
you get people come along who seem to have this natural ability to strike the ball, but if they then don't work, they're just not going to get on.
Right.
You need both of them. And I meet a lot of kids who have no apparent predisposition towards mathematics, who then education's not about filling the bucket, it's about lighting the fire. You give them something that engages them and gets them starting to think about a thing, and they can come to life, and suddenly they might be slow, they might not have the knowledge that other people have got, they might not have the practice and the practiced skills that some of the others have, but sometimes they just blossom, and there's no apparent reason why they should have been pre-wired for that, and yet they can do it. So I think it's a combination of these things.
My favorite example is Peter Cochrane, who was the head of BT Research in the 90s. And he grew up in a mining village. There were 3 books in his house, I think the Bible and probably something somebody read on a summer vacation, and I forget what the third was. And, at 11, he was sent off to take the 11 plus exam, which would determine whether he spent his life in the mines or maybe went on in school and, got a job in a shop or something. And he failed. And he got a job digging holes for telephone poles. And after a while, he decided to go to night school. And that was when he finally got tutoring in math, which was the thing that was holding him back. And he went on to be the head of BT Research.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
I happen to know that guy. I don't know. I think you have people who we classify as underachievers who may have a lot of talent. I don't know. I think about, so I had a trigonometry class one time and I just couldn't get through it. The college trig, couldn't get through that class. And I think I dropped it, but the guy took me aside and he said, you can do this, and I took it over again and I had no trouble with it the second time through. It's like, I think part of it was overcoming my own thinking that I couldn't do maths very well. And if I quit telling myself that, I was okay.
And sometimes what you need is an earlier exposure to all of the ideas, and then come back to it, and then you can start to put it into a framework. You can start to see, oh yeah, that's coming later in the course, but I can see how that's setting up for that. And also sometimes the second time it's explained in a different way, and that can suit you as well. I mean, this talk that I did yesterday about the algebraic pentagon, I'm talking about doing arithmetic not by taking pebbles and saying I've got 3 pebbles in this hand and 5 pebbles in this hand, and I mix them, I get 8 pebbles, but talking about operating on the number line. So, you've got the entire number line. If I want to add 1, I can add 1 to all of the numbers in the number line by just sliding the whole thing off to the right by one place. And if I want to multiply by 3, I expand the entire number line, and I'm multiplying everything by 3. And you start to think of these numerical operations, arithmetic operations, as transformations of the number line. And it's a totally different way of thinking about it from the way that most people start off. And the wonderful thing about this, I don't know how much mathematical background you guys have, but there are 2-dimensional numbers. They're called complex numbers. And the way they're usually introduced is by people saying, well, -1 doesn't have a square root. Every time you square a number, the answer is positive. So if I want to square a number and get a negative number, there's no number that works. So let's just invent one. It's not actually how it happened in history, but they say, let's just conjure this from thin air and see what happens. But in fact, if you start to do arithmetic by talking about transforming the number line, you can follow a line of reasoning. It's a little bit long for this, but you can follow a line of reasoning that lets the square root of -1 emerge as an unavoidable consequence of the things that you're doing in order to understand arithmetic. And it's a wonderful thing. And it opens the door to so many things. It's where geometry meets algebra. If you have a geometry problem, you can convert it to algebra. If you have an algebra problem, you can convert it to geometry. And complex numbers are just superb like that. And sometimes with your trig class, sometimes you've done it once, and then by the time you get to the end, you still haven't quite understood it. You don't really know what's going on. You fail the exam. But the second time you come through, you've got a framework to put it into. And maybe there's a comment that somebody did make the first time that you didn't notice. But now you're in a place to hear it. And suddenly it becomes almost effortless. Not quite. You still got to put in some work. But that second time through can make a big difference. And certainly thinking about it in a different way, a complementary way, can make a huge difference as well.
We would be remiss if we didn't ask you about juggling.
So, yeah, I don't remember learning to juggle. I must have been 12, 13, and basically I learned to juggle 3. People start by juggling 2. They go around, you sort of throw this one up here and pass that one over there. But if you try and do 3 like that, it's really hard. So the way you juggle 3 is you think, well, I've only got to have 1 ball in the air because I've got 1 in each hand. So if the 1 in the air is high enough and it's coming down close to you, then what you do is take one that you're holding and lob it in the air, and that frees up a hand to catch the one that's coming down. And then you do the same thing with the other hand. Lob that ball into the air, pretty much straight up so that it's going to be easy to catch when it comes down. And then you've got a hand free to catch the one that's there. And then you make this into a pattern, and you end up with the balls going up in the middle and down on the outside, throw up in the middle, down the outside, up in the middle, down the outside. And you end up with 3 balls like that. And the thing about this is you're throwing all the balls in exactly the same way. And if you think about it, this is going to be slightly weird, but this actually works. Stay with me. When I'm juggling by myself and I'm throwing the balls, and I'm just doing juggling balls and not clubs or anything else, I'm throwing the balls to myself, clearly, but I'm throwing the balls to myself in the future. So every time I throw a ball, I'm giving future me a problem of catching it. I make that as easy as I can, but I'm throwing the ball to myself in the future. And when you juggle 3 balls, red, green, blue, red, green, blue, you throw them the same distance into the future each time. And that's what happens if I'm throwing right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Then I get red, green, blue, and the balls have to change hands. Okay. Now, if I juggle 4 balls and I throw them all the same distance into the future, then they end up staying in the same hand. Red, green, blue, yellow, red, green, blue, yellow, red, green, blue. They have to stay in the same hand. So I end up juggling 2 in each hand. Then when you go to 5, they cross, and 6, they don't. 7, they cross, and 8, they don't. I never got as far as 8. I used to juggle 7. Can't do that anymore. I can juggle 5. But now if I start to think of this as I throw the ball to myself in the future, why should I always throw the same distance? Why not throw one of them further into the future? So when I'm juggling 3, instead of throwing the red ball 3 beats into the future, why not throw it 4 beats into the future? That means it would have to come back to the same hand, and that leaves a gap in the place where it used to land but won't anymore. So what I can do is the next one that I throw, put that into the gap that's been vacated by the red ball. So if I think of this as throwing the balls to myself in the future, I look at where the balls land, I look at the sites where they land, and I swap the sites where they land. Hence the name Siteswap, S-I-T-E, swap. But I don't have to do this with just 2, and I don't have to throw it only 1 step further into the future. And so you start to ask, what's possible? What combinations of throwing things different distances into the future will end up without 2 balls landing at the same time? You can catch 2 balls at once. It's a bit tricky. So let's just make sure they always land in different places. And then the next thing is, if it's totally chaotic, it's not pleasing. You want to have some pattern to it. You want it to be not entirely repetitive, but you want it to be a little bit complex, but you want it to be understandable and comprehensible. So you start to talk about throwing the balls different distances into the future with some repeating pattern. So for example, with 3 balls, you can throw each of them just 3 beats into the future. So we say do 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. But you can instead do 4, 4, 1. Throw a ball 4 beats into the future, throw the next ball 4 beats into the future, and the third ball into the immediate next throw, which means you have to zip it from one hand to the other. And then you can either go back to the normal 3-ball pattern, or you can repeat it, but starting with the other hand. So the interesting thing about this is that many of the juggling tricks that were known at the time we were doing this fall into this way of thinking. But when you start to ask, what are all the possibilities? Some of the possibilities did not correspond to juggling tricks we already knew. So we discovered new juggling tricks because of this way of thinking about it. And that was the brilliant thing. It's a bit like the periodic table of elements. You know, once you get the concept of an atomic number, then you know you've got all the elements when you've got an element for every number, 1, 2, 3, 4, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium. But they had the courage with the periodic table, they had the courage to arrange things according to how they behaved, and they had the courage to leave gaps and said there should be an element here. And then we understood that that was because of the way the atomic number works. And it's not as deep, meaningful, and far-reaching consequences as understanding chemistry. But that's what happened with our juggling, is we found a way of thinking about it. And it wasn't just us, it was actually emerging all over the world. I've now found at least 7 different people who were involved in doing the same sort of thing over the same 12-month period. And so it was clearly an idea whose time had come.
Well, here's something that I learned from Googling before our interview here. There's a controversy in juggling. Is it an art or a sport?
Well, indeed. I mean, but you get exactly the same thing in one of my other hobbies, which is ballroom dancing. Is ballroom dancing an art or a sport? And they do talk about dance sport. And we've actually, literally, my wife and I have been out at a dance this afternoon. And after doing some of these things, you come off the floor, sweat, out of breath, heaving. Your muscles hurt. You've been exerting yourself enormously. So it's from some points of view, it's clearly a sport. It ticks all of the boxes for sport. But equally, there is an artistic component when you go into competitions. And so it is with juggling. You can have technical jugglers who do the most extraordinarily difficult stuff, and it looks rubbish. But equally, you can have people doing simple, elegant tricks that I could do, but they make them look good. They make them look really good. And there are a couple of different groups who do that.
Which category? Which category were the brothers Karamazov?
They were phenomenally good technical jugglers, but they also put together a performance, an act.
I saw them live once when I was visiting Oregon.
Yeah. So I know one of the guys who was actually in the Karamazov, and it's very much. There's also the question of art versus sport versus performance, and performance is another issue. So if you watch a street juggler, there are good street jugglers and bad street jugglers, and the good street jugglers are rarely doing anything technically difficult, but they are creating an act that will engage an audience, and it's usually a comedy act, but it's based around the physical skill of juggling. The Karamazovs, their performance was amazing, and entertaining as well for the normies, for the civilians, the people who couldn't juggle. They could enjoy the performance of the Karamazovs. The same is true with Passing Zone, John Wee, and I can't remember the other chap's name. And the one that really combines all three is the Gandini Juggling Project. So the Gandinis do phenomenal art, phenomenal performance, amazing technical skill. And some of it's physically extremely difficult as well. So it kind of classes as a sport from that point of view. But the Gandinis are just brilliant. It's a bit like Cirque du Soleil, but concentrating on the juggling side of things.
Have you used a fushigi ball?
I don't know what one of those is.
Oh, it's the one where it's just a lightweight thing that actually kind of floats. And apparently, I was just reading about it online, and there are some folks who think it's a great way to juggle, and hardcore jugglers said, no, it's not.
Dismiss it. Yeah. The same is true with scarf juggling. So if you get silk scarves, one of the things you can do is you can put a silk scarf in the air and then leave it there, and you've got one in each hand. And so that one's just gently floating down. So you take the one that you're holding in this hand and you put it up over there, and you will release that and allow that to gently drift down. So you get this one. And so it's kind of juggling in slow motion. You can't throw them into the air. They don't go. They just go and stop. But you can oh, there's the Kashiwa. Okay. Oh, right. Yes. Okay. So it's one of those. With the scarf juggling, you can basically juggle in slow motion, but then because it's traveling slowly and because they only ever travel downwards, because you have to place them in the air, you can suddenly do other artistic moves around them as well. So there's a new dimension opening up to the skill, the performance levels that you can do and the skills required. But that's it's one of the ways that some people like to teach juggling, because it lets you get this concept of one in each hand and one in the air, and it slows it all down for you. Personally, I find it easier to do one ball exercises and two ball exercises and build directly into what we call toss juggling. But there are different ways in. As we were talking about with trigonometry, sometimes the different ways of thinking about it give you exactly what you need. The combination of the two is sometimes exactly what you need. Very much a case of don't be one-dimensional. Find every way you can think about this sort of thing. And of course, if you're into juggling and the Koshigi ball, then suddenly you can also start to go into sleight of hand and magic and delusion and that sort of thing. Closely allied. Juggler, in its original sense, meant one that confuses, and that was basically what sleight of hand and magic is. Classical magic is. So, yeah, these art forms are genuinely connected.
Yeah, I mean the thing about coming at it with with more than one angle. I mean, I think now that I found calculus difficult at first because or physics difficult. I didn't understand calculus, what calculus was for until I was given a chance to take a physics class. And I think, if in my era, girls were not taught electric circuits and all that kind of thing. And, my brother certainly was, but I wasn't. And so I didn't really understand what they were talking about. I mean, I could do the math, but it didn't have any reference to the real world for me until.
Yeah, very much. What's the point?
And I often think that actually we should be teaching physics and physical education together.
There's an argument to make for that. I mean, personally, a lot of people say these days when they teach math in school, you've got to make it relevant. You've got to do actual things that you'll end up using and so forth. I would have hated that. And I know other people who would have hated that.
I would have hated it too. But the average kid who loves football of some form or another, it would make a lot more sense, or even in tennis, you would actually play tennis better for understanding that the easiest place to hit the ball is back where it came from.
Yeah. And absolutely. And again, this goes to multiple ways of thinking about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the kids that I talk to love the thrill of the chase. Give them a bit of a puzzle to solve, and they'll be into it. Others completely turned off by that. And this is also true of professional mathematicians. Eugenia Chang hates puzzles, absolutely hates puzzles. Whereas others, John Conway, loved puzzles. So it's people are different. I mean, this is the whole thing. People are weird. And
I always think that I hate games until I start playing them, and then I usually get sucked in.
Yeah.
The only problem I ever had with juggling was gravity.
Yeah, gravity sucks.
True.
Well, actually, gravity is a myth. The Earth sucks. I spoke with T.K. Mattingly. So T.K. Mattingly was the astronaut who got bumped off Apollo 13 because they thought he'd been exposed to German measles. Ended up helping bring them back when they had the explosion. And he ended up as command module pilot in Apollo 16. And we were lucky enough to have dinner with him. And one of the things that everybody always said to him, when he was in the command module, when Charlie Duke and Cernan went down, no, it wasn't Cernan, I can't remember who the other was, Harrison, I think, went down onto the surface, and TK was left alone in the command module. And people said, weren't you lonely? He said, well, no, suddenly I had, my roommates were no longer here. So suddenly I had all this space. And they said, well, weren't you bored? And he said, well, I had a bunch of stuff to do, but every time I didn't have anything to do, what I would do is go on as far as I could into one side of the command module and then throw something and watch it go in a straight line. And he said he just never got tired of that, never got tired of watching something go in a straight line. So, yeah, gravity is weird. Gravity is the juggler's, well, both the juggler's friend and enemy. I mean, you have to learn how to use it. The Gandinis do amazing things with bouncing the balls and so forth as well. So
I could probably play tennis on the moon.
Well, they had a go at playing golf on the moon. So it didn't go very far because he said he had trouble swinging the club in the spacesuit. So he couldn't really get a good swing in the spacesuit. But the problem is you're so used to 1G, you're so used to the gravity, put you in a different environment, and suddenly things that you think are easy become hard. Buzz Aldrin said that, working outside was phenomenally difficult with the different gravity. They found that really, really hard. This is why all of the Apollo missions leading up to Apollo 11 and then beyond, they had to do so much work to learn how to work in low gravity. And that's tough on Earth. You can't you've got the vomit comet and you've got a couple of other techniques, but it's really hard. Even the neutral buoyancy tank doesn't quite work because the buoyancy is on the suit that you're wearing, and you still sag in the suit you're wearing. So it's not the same. It's just not the same.
Well, at least we know the moon doesn't suck.
Well, it sucks, but it just sucks less.
Sucks less, yeah. We're getting close to running out of time, and I just wanted to bring up math jams. Can you tell us about math jams?
Yeah. So, how long have I got? So the basic idea, Matt Parker met up with some friends in a pub in London. He actually does have friends. They're not all imaginary. met up with some friends in a pub in London, and it turned out that they were all maths oriented, physics, engineering oriented, and one of them was having a puzzle. So they ended up talking technical talk. And at the end of the evening, one of them said, "This has been great. We should do this again." And one of them, who was more detail oriented than the others, said, "Okay, when? Let's put it in the diary." And so they met up again, and they had another evening of basically unconstrained tech type talk. And this turned into every month they would meet up, and other people started to join them. And so they called this the Maths Jam. And it's the monthly Maths Jam. And then Katie Steckles in Manchester said, "This isn't fair. You know, I'm 200 miles away. I can't join in." They said, "Well, you know, you get other people in the pub, and we'll tweet at each other." This is when Twitter was still okay. We'll tweet at each other. And so we ended up with 2 of these gatherings, and then other people started to start them up. And so now, every month, all around the world, people gather together on the second last Tuesday of the month, usually, and have an evening in the company of other people who are happy if you're talking about maths. They're not necessarily mathematicians, but they're happy in the company of maths. Then this, and the Gathering for Gardner is a thing that happens every 2 years in America to celebrate the life and work of Martin Gardner. And I put together these 2 ideas. And so now every year we have a Maths Jam annual gathering. And we've got, we usually have about 180 to 200 people turn up for an entire weekend of just getting together. We have lightning talks. We have 40 to 50 5-minute talks, no talk longer than 5 minutes. And then we start with lunch on Saturday, go through to lunch on Sunday. On the Saturday evening, we have the Maths Jam, where people get together and play music and sing altered lyrics to allegedly well-known tunes. We have activity tables where people just offer to run an activity. There's always a crafting table where people will teach you to knit or crochet or spin. I taught absolutely utter basic backgammon one time. In 1 hour, I recorded, edited, and uploaded a math video. And so, you know, there are tables with toys and games and so forth. And that happens on the Saturday evening as well. So it's just a gathering of people who are content to be in the company of people talking about maths. But they don't always talk about maths. They can talk about other stuff as well. When you get people who have a shared interest, you'll often find they have other shared interests as well.
It sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And we are also fully hybrid. So if you go to mathsjam.com, then you'll find out about the monthly Maths Jams. There might be one near you. And if there isn't one near you, find some friends and just get together. We don't use Twitter anymore. We do use Mastodon. And in fact, we have a server in the Mastodon universe called Mathstodon. So mastodon.xyz. It sounded like a good idea to have that pun, but so many people get it wrong. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But mastodon.xyz is one of the servers in the Mastodon universe, the Fediverse. And so we get people sort of posting on there when they have the monthly Maths Jams. And we also have a running commentary. And it's also possible to get a remote ticket to the annual Maths Jam, which this year is November 22nd, 23rd, I think. And there are tickets still available to that if you're going to be in the UK. And it's a fun weekend.
And you have some ability to drive to an obscure location.
In what sense?
Isn't it someplace you can only get to by car?
No. This year, normally it's been in Yarnfield. There is a train station close by, and we used to run a shuttle service. But this year, for the first time in a long time, it's actually at Kent's Hill Park in Milton Keynes. So it's perfectly possible to get to by public transport. Not as easy as some people led me to believe, but it's easy enough to get to Milton Keynes Station or Bletchley Station and then just grab a taxi from there. It's close enough to be able to get to without a problem. And a lot of people arrive early and get started. I mean, last year we had 180 people come to the event, but 95 of them turned up on the Friday night. and stayed overnight and had the Saturday morning just sort of socializing together. Technically it finishes mid-afternoon on Sunday, but we just don't get rid of people until 7 o'clock at night on Sunday. There are still people hanging around, and some people stay Sunday night as well.
I thought you were going to tell me they stay up all night.
Well, there was one year where somebody put onto Twitter, this was early on, somebody at 3 a.m. said, I have to go to bed. There's nobody left to play with. That was on that was on the Sunday morning. And people are a bit bleary for breakfast on the Sunday morning. It's an annual event. It's only once a year that they get to do this, and they get to hang out with people where they can enthuse about stuff without having to worry about the reactions. And it's incredibly positive. It may be that the person you're talking to doesn't actually care about what you're talking about, but they will recognize that it's important to you and exciting to you. And they will probably point you at somebody else and say, go talk to them because they like the same stuff. And it's actively positive in the interactions that you get, even when it's deeply technical. There was a guy who talked about
sounds fantastic.
Yeah, there was a guy who talked about taking MRIs of cakes while they were baking. And how you can possibly analyze the heat distribution and how the cake changes and the mathematical transforms, because when you take an MRI or when you take a CT scan, you then have to do the inverse transform. And the mathematics behind that is fascinating. And he gave a quick sketch overview. And the idea of the 5-minute talk is it's an invitation to come and talk to the speakers. So we have sort of 7 or 8 talks in just 3/4 of an hour, but then we have a half-hour break, and all of the speakers get corralled into one area. So if you want to talk to somebody about what they were talking about, you know where to find them, and then you end up next to somebody who shares your interests, and so you end up with that automatic network creation, which is a brilliant thing.
Speaking of timed talks, we've reached the end of our hour, and this has been fantastic, and we'd love for you to come back and join us again sometime.
I would be delighted.
I don't think we'd ever run out of things to talk about.
Well, as people say about me, everything has a story, and there is no such thing as a short story.
Well, thanks for joining us, Colin, and we'll see you soon.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
You can stay in touch with Plutopia at plutopia.io. On Facebook, look for @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.